Please give a warm welcome to actor Joel Edgerton.
Thank you.
Clint is delayed. He's going to join us shortly. He was always late on set, right?
Yeah, this movie directed itself. He was never there.
And
I thought this was a good chance for me to come in and take credit for everything.
yeah, the screenplay you wrote is absolutely mesmerizing.
By the way, when you meet him, he's going to be mortified that he's late, but he's literally going to just.
Actually, you know, people showed up for you here today.
Ah, thank you.
I'm joking. When I saw you again just now, I mentioned I'd seen all of your film movies, and I'm a big fan. I noticed in this film your physicality. You actually, we can tell that you can tell the story and what's happening. It's so detailed. Your body moves differently after the trauma. Later on, as you're aging, we actually watch the toll on your body. Can you tell us about?
I was really interested, particularly focusing in on a performance with very few words, how the audience could track what was going on with me. And there was a few things I realized that this is one of the most personal things I've ever had to do on screen. You know, I'm 51, I have two 4-year-old twins that were 2 years old when we shot the film. The greatest fear I have is anything might happen to them, and I'm in love and I'm a husband, and you know, I try and work out how to be a dad, and it felt like I'm Robert without an axe, you know. And if I trusted that, the audience would see that. But beyond that, I'm really interested how experience can shape a person and bear down on them, particularly heavy emotions, and how the soul or mojo can get kicked out of a person, how laughter can be a sign of the reignition or the regrowth of a person, but also how physical labour or sport can really break a body. You can see, I know a lot of old sportsmen in Australia, and they played football for years, and you go, oh, I can tell you're still really strong, but I can tell your spine is really, really weeping. And I feel a bit of that myself. Oh, look who's here.
Oh, it's Clint. Clint Bentley, everybody. Good.
Hello, pal.
He was just telling us how this movie directed itself.
Yeah,
and the movie wrote itself. And
this is how I did on set. I just showed up late and I was like, how's it going? Good? Okay, I'm going to go.
But he was telling us, I asked him about how physical the performance is, that we're able to tell the passage of time and the way that trauma impacts his physicality. And you interrupted.
But you know, the idea that even now I feel it sometimes, that if I want to turn around and look at something, my whole body has to come. You know what I mean? Used to be just like, what's that? And now it's like, you know, and that's okay.
There was one particular moment that stood out for me, is when you show up to the window and look at the space landing, and the way you carry your body to that moment was.
Thank you. I'm glad you noticed that, and you know, I always remember that, thinking that a physical performance was about the bigger moves, in the same way that visual effects is often about the bigger visual effects movies. There's, for example, some wonderful visual effects in here, and the reason it's so good is because you don't even notice it. But that physicality should be an element of every performance, as subtle as it might seem. That I believe, as I get more experience and realise that it's not just about what goes on here or through the eyes, that a performance is about the entire body. And some of my favourite actors, I feel electricity coming out of their fingertips, you know, that it's about all of them and not just the sections that the camera's seeing.
Correct. On the same vein, Clint, I've loved your collaboration with Adolfo Veloso, your DP, and the way you guys work the camera, tells his story. For example, I don't know if you guys notice, at the beginning of the movie when he's a child, the camera is very still. It's like still images. As he starts growing up, the camera starts moving a little bit more. When we get with Gladys, the camera is super joyful. And, tell us about navigating that, telling the story through the visual language.
No, you described it well, and thank you. And yeah, Adolfo is just an incredible cinematographer, not only in his technical ability to take any moment and, Joel and Felicity can have the freedom to just follow some chickens around at sunset. And I know that wherever Adolfo is going to put the camera is not only going to give them freedom, but is also going to get a beautiful shot out of it. And then within that, I think there's something about him that's very special that I appreciate, that it's not just beauty for beauty's sake. It's in service of telling the story. And so that was very intentional from the beginning, is in those early moments where it's like giving the snapshots of his life. We wanted it to feel like photographs, like you're holding, like you're holding a photograph of his memories, of himself and of the things that he saw, like the two-headed calf and all of that. And so everything was either on sticks or on a dolly. And then it's very loose and free, as you said, when he's remembering back to his time with his family. And then it locks off again, and it's very tight again. And even the moment, there's a long moment where he's walking with Ignatius Jack, where Ignatius Jack takes him, hunting again, and it's just on a long dolly track, whereas we would have done that handheld. So all of that to say, like, I could go on about Adolfo's work, but there's something very special and magical about it, where it's always in service of the story, and somehow has this great attention to detail and attention to craft, but also gives actors really true freedom to do what they're best at.
Tell me why, from the get-go, we have the aspect ratio that you chose. Things are constricted. You do this type framing where the headroom of him, he seems to be either trapped by his environment or overwhelmed by the environment. The composition is terrific.
Thank you. It was something we talked about early on, where we wanted to have a frame that could accommodate. We knew we were going into a location that had lots of big trees and tall forests and mountains, and we wanted a frame that could accommodate that. And had we gone with like a 239 or a 235, it naturally limits some of that. And we wanted to, yes, have this space that have this more square frame that accommodates the human face on close-ups, but then also can accommodate the world around it. Then landing on the specific 3-2 frame, that is outside of being a frame that's very annoying to everybody in post-production because it's a little odd. But it's the frame that's closest to a postcard or a 3x5 photograph. And the way we talked about it was as if you had found this box of photographs and started looking through this guy's life and was trying to piece it together.
Joel, we've seen you in London before. There are similarities in the fact that these are courageous, brave men but they don't have the words to express all the turmoil inside. What is it about you and navigating toward these characters that
I really love that this film is a celebration of ordinary people, and Richard Loving was another one of those people, an ordinary person like Robert, who the world is happening to him. He's not the one happening to the world. He's not activating change. He's not rescuing things. It feels like he's being dealt blows by the world. And Richard Loving was similar. He sort of had a lot to rail against that was happening to him, but didn't understand his place or his ability, or whether it was possible to speak and to express himself. And I feel like this is a homage not just to ordinary men, but the kind of men I know from Australia, and I know maybe it's generalisation, but a very rural thing, and of men who have a lot going on, but it's hard to read and it's hard to for them to express particularly deeper emotions. But we know they're there, and you can read them, as subtle as guarded as they might be. And as I said, I think because so much of what Robert goes through, I think we all know feelings of being in love and fears around being a parent and concerns around that the audience goes, I know this guy. Even though I'm not a logger, I can see myself in him, and trusting that would come through, knowing how personal it was for me and how connected an audience can be to what I think most of us feel is our own ordinariness.
Yeah.
And celebrating that.
Yeah. How is it that you're able to convey this complex emotions by just staring at the sunset?
I'm still wondering that as well. How do you do this?
I just figure that if I think the right things and I'm there and I hand myself over to Clint and the story, that the camera will see it, and I hang on to. There's a couple of old film sayings that I agree with and some I disagree with. One is that the camera sees, what is it? I mean, the eyes don't lie, and the camera will see into your soul. If I brought that, then I'd be fine. And to not over-adorn things. The one I disagree with is W.C. Fields saying you should never work with animals or children. Because there was a real joy in this because of the filmmaking freedom that Clint and Adolfo were able to adapt to and go, all right, it's not about the script in these moments, it's about us learning from the minds of organisms and children that do not care about movie making. They just want to live in the moment. So for me to live in the moment and then to learn from the animals and the children along the way, you know?
Yeah. Going back to the visuals, Clint, I loved how you cut from wide shots that incorporated nature as another character, and it would cut to close-ups of him or Felicity, etc. Tell us about the importance of bringing in nature as another character.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about him real quick, just before bouncing off of that, is that there was a moment that I think encapsulates that wordless thing that he can do so well, that I was thinking about the other night. Is we were deep into we were in the sound design of we were done with the edit, and there's this moment where he's by the lake, and that had voiceover all over it, and I kept bumping up against it. It was some of my favorite writing that we had done in the movie, and I loved the words, and yet it was keeping people, when I was exposing it to people to get notes, it was keeping them from the moment. And I found, like, by taking all of that voiceover out, what he was doing with, like, looking at his hands and sitting in there, being in the lake, said so much more, and suddenly gave people access to that scene and what his character was going through, more than all of this voiceover talking about it.
But did you always know that he was capable to give you it's basically a silent role.
Yeah, and that's the thing that excited me about working with him, was been a fan of his close your ears, Joel. I've been a fan of his for a long time and knew that he would be great at it, but then even still, throughout filming it, and then that's what, like, all the way through the edit into the sound design, was continually astounded by, I think, the depth of what he could pull across so simply.
Wow.
Nature's also nice too, and we always wanted, there's two parts of your question, but one is that we always wanted nature to feel like a character in the film, and not just that was from the beginning, not just like a backdrop for these human dramas. That nature was its own force, and the dogs had their own lives, and the chickens had their own lives, and the trees had their own lives outside of the lives that the humans were living, and so that ended up, adding to moments where a person is going to die when Arn, you've all seen it, so I can spoil it, but when Arn Peoples walks under the tree, that's a big moment, and yet we shoot it from the perspective of the tree watching him. And things like that. We really wanted that to feel like a force. And then in the edit, those wide shots to close-ups and all of these different styles. I think it's just like about trying to give the audience a treat and keep them going. It's a movie that's not.
And you underline that by cutting to the close-ups of,
Right.
of the family happenings or him, but constantly reminding us of this
grandeur.
of the grandeur.
And I think part of that is thematic, and then part of it is just rhythmic of trying to give the audience a treat and trying to keep them. You don't want it, if you just like take it, master shot, close up, and then the next scene, master shot, close up, then we're all very astute viewers at this point, and it's just about keeping us going on a subconscious level, so you can settle into a film as an audience, and then start to experience your own things that are outside of whatever is being said.
Now, you earlier used the term voiceover, and I'm going to reprimand you because you created a character with that narrator.
Thank you.
And it's something that I've rarely seen successfully done in cinema. I mean, I think of Barry Lyndon, I think of Julie Jim, that has the voiceover, as you call it, Jim, as
The
kind
character,
of
yeah.
as a character. Tell us about how you were able to finagle that.
I think part of it, I thought of the same touchstones, and it was something that even from like making short films, I always thought like it'd be fun to make a narrator one day like the one in Jules and Jim or Y Tu Mama Tambien or some of these great narrators that are characters and that feel like they're telling you a story and can take you on they can go on a brief aside and start talking about a comet, and you're like, well, where are you going with this? But really, like, that was an aspect of that was trying to, one, give us access to this character who doesn't, as you said, doesn't have the words to express the deep emotions that he has running through him. And so without betraying the character and all of a sudden have him saying, I feel like I've gone through a traumatic event, and blah, blah, that wouldn't be true to that character. But then also bringing some of the voice of Dennis Johnson's voice from the novella into the film. He's got such a subtle irony that and a sense of humor that he uses that helps tell the story. And that was just something that I enjoyed about the book that I felt would be well served in bringing it into the film without making it a cheap trick,
Yeah, and you cast the great Will Patton.
Oh, he's amazing.
How long did it take for him to work this?
He was so sweet because he was shooting something else. I'd pushed it up into the last minute. Our editor, Parker Laramie, was doing the temp voiceover, and we were putting things in and taking them out and moving things around, and then I just pushed it to the very last minute, and then flew up to Calgary where Will Patton had been shooting a 5-day week, and yet he loved. So he not only had read the audiobook of this book, and he does that, but he was also close friends with Dennis Johnson in his life. And so he was so sweet to just spend his weekend doing this narration, and even after working a 5-day week. And so we did it very quickly in 2 days, and yet it never felt, he was just so lovely and generous and wonderful about digging in and finding the nuances of each line. It was a really beautiful way to cap up everything.
And Joel, before this opportunity came about, you set out to get the rights yourself. Tell us about why was it that compelled you for the story?
I read the novella. It had been gifted to me after I directed Boy Raised.
Which is phenomenal, people. Watch Boy Raised, directed by Joel Edgerton.
Thank you. And it was a rap gift, and when someone gives you a book, it's something special about that. There's one thing about walking into a bookstore, I get overwhelmed by it, but that's about me trying to work out what I might want to choose. But if somebody chooses a piece of writing for you and they know you, it means something. And I read it immediately, and it immediately resonated with me. And then even though I know, like Clint, I've heard Clint say many times, it's not an immediate kind of thing that you read and think this would be a straight adaptation. It'd be a tricky thing to turn into a film when you first read it. But I saw this philosophical, this sort of Western that was philosophical and a rumination on life itself, and cherishing life and how fleeting life is. And there was violence at the fringes of it, but not in the typical way that a Western often plays with typical sort of black and white stories of retribution and goodies and baddies. It was far more nuanced. So anyway, I inquired after the rights, and I'm very happy to say they were taken. Because
Why?
because I think the adaptation in my hands, I don't know that I would have done nearly as good a job, and it allowed me 4 years later when Clint reached out to me. I had really, like I say, that I feel like I'm Robert with an axe. I mean, I had then become a father, and I'm going to get upset talking about it. I remember telling my wife, because he came to see me in Chicago, I was shooting Dark Matter, and my wife and I talk about each other's lives because we have a really good relationship. She was saying, what were you meeting this guy Clint about? And I tried to tell her the story of Train Dreams in my own simple way, and I couldn't even finish telling her. And I realised then just how much more the story was under my skin. And beautifully, she was like, even though she hates going to rural places because her life needs a big city to be plugged into, she has her own very complex career life. She was like, all right, I guess we're all going to Spokane. Because she knows what matters to me, and this story really mattered to me. And what mattered the most, I think, was that I didn't get my hands on it, that serendipitously it came my way, and for me as a chance to sit in the seat of Robert and just concentrate on playing him as a man in the hands of, Clint and Greg Quidar's amazing adaptation, and to be looked after in a really special film.
Clint, I have to ask you about the editing, which is actually the most spectacular editing I've seen this year so far. Tell us about how it came about. There's a rhythm to it. You're not afraid to start us slow. I was impressed in the editing with the dream sequences, which are montages, and how different they are and how they build momentum as the movie progresses.
Thank you. It took a long time and many iterations, and I'll say Parker Laramie, who also edited Jockey, is an amazing editor, and we just kept refining it. It's funny that I really feel like, at least for myself, that I find the film in the edit. We go out and you try and get the script as close as possible, and then you shoot it, and you let it, as Joel was talking about with the children, you kind of follow where the film is taking you when you're shooting it, and let it be alive and try and gather up all these things. And then in the edit is really the time to find out what the film is. And it's something that I think you're trying to find the rhythm of it, almost like a song, like music, that's going to pull you through, especially on a film like this that doesn't have the normal plot mechanisms. That's all right, well, here's the second act turn, and here's the inciting incident and all of that. It's not a heist movie or something like that. And so you've got to rely on something else to let, if the audience feels like that you're taking them somewhere, then they'll settle into it, and they'll feel comfortable settling into it. And yeah, I just loved, we shot a bunch of, we were shooting very naturalistic sequences and almost documentary-like sequences, and we're shooting straight dialogue sequences that are very traditional. And then we were able to just go out with some drone lights and shoot some almost stuff that you would only get to do in a commercial or something like that, and more like avant-garde stuff to then mix in. And I just really got a kick out of it. It was great.
Can I interject for a second? Obviously this is not my first rodeo as an actor, and I get to watch different directors, and hearing Clint say that he works a film out in the edit, I want to also qualify that while that's true, it seems like to me that's the sensitivity to understand where the final stage of a film is a chance to massage what's there. but not in the way that I have experienced before, where there are directors that go and just shoot everything and go, well, you know, overshoot almost, and then get in the edit and say, okay, now what is this film? There always felt like such an intentional psychological motivation for almost every shot or every sequence or every scene. So I just want to make sure that no one's getting the impression that Clint's just out there gathering information, going, I don't know what this is yet. Because I always felt like between him and Adolfo, there was a reason for everything. And then every now and then, there was also a reason to go, all right, this isn't even in the script, but let's bring life to this family. Wow. And then Adolfo and he would find the intention within that. I just want to make sure they don't get the impression you don't know what you're doing.
Thank you, Joel. We sort of can read through his bullshit modesty, and you're very talented, Clint. And I want to ask you. This sounds kind of nerdy, but I'm going to ask it. You do 2 fire sequences in this movie, and I was astonished how different they are, and they serve the story. Let's be specific. The Gladys fire sequence has this sort of Wong Kar-wai, dreamy sort of take to it. You know, you slow down the speed. You know, tell us about creating those 2 and the importance of having 2 different visual takes to the fire.
Yeah. Thank you. And no, I don't want to mischaracterize. I think there's something.
We're teasing you.
Yeah, no, I know. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into it, but it's such a beautiful medium that you find yourself at a certain point. It's very mysterious, even when you're working with it, you know. And even though like we edited probably 35 different versions of the ending to try and get there, and I'm always like wanting to push it as far as it can go, and yet the medium. It feels boundless, like it can surprise you. But the fire sequences, yeah, we Adolfo and I talked early on that like, okay, we've got these 2 kind of banner fire sequences, and you've got to do them differently. They can't feel like the same thing. And so we wanted that first one.
Because another filmmaker would have just shown the same footage for
right.
But you.
Well, just I think going back to that thing of just like trying to, you know, make something great if you can, you know, and so like these are 2 very thematically different experiences. One, the first one is you know we're trying to get into the experience that he's having of like walking into this kind of hell to try and find his family and trying to get as close as he can and then being stopped, and so wanting to make it as realistic as we can, and looking at what happens in like close to an actual fire where it kind of creates its own weather system of wind, and then trying to have beats inside there, like story beats within the fire, where you know part of his clothes catch on fire and all of that, and then the second one with Gladys is experiential in a different way, in a more impressionistic way, where he's being given a vision of something that is her experience, but it's secondhand and dreamlike. And it's funny you mentioned the Wong Kar-wai thing. We were trying to figure out how to do that, and I remember watching Miyazaki's last film around the time when Adolfo and I were in prep, and there's a fire sequence early on, and what Miyazaki does is like the animation kind of comes apart in the early part of the film. I forget the protagonist's name, but as he's running towards the fire, and I was trying to describe it to Adolfo of like, I think this is it. And he had the night before gone back and watched Chungking Express again and was describing that. And so it came together very quickly. We used that same approach of like shooting it at 12 frames per second rather than the traditional 24 to try and like drag the image a little bit.
Oh, I thought you guys must have had a conversation about that. You nailed that.
Yeah, you nailed. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Like,
Yeah,
nailed it.
Are you teasing
No surprise.
No, Clint was showing me, Wong Kar-wai, and then when you said that, I thought, you guys must have had a chat. It's like,
No,
what are you wearing today? What are you wearing today? What is that? You get a prize for that.
Oh, thank you. I just literally met him.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
you
I have
definitely
seen-
get a
but I
prize then.
But he's seen
But
a couple movies.
I study film.
Yeah.
Yeah. You act in films. I study films. You
But
interrupted
yeah, good catch.
our
Good
thought.
catch.
Sorry.
Good catch.
Where were we?
Wong Kar-wai and Miyazaki, and yeah, we can geek out.
Now back to you, Joel, since that's what you wanted. It's like, enough of this Wong Kar-wai bullshit. What about
you
me?
guys, ma. Film. What about me?
No, you're joking aside. You have a couple of moments where you actually let go of the emotion. And how did you regulate the faucet? So each moment that you break down is completely different, in a different level. I mean, when you sit down with a Chinese man and you scream, why? Later on, when you go hunting, and and I forget what you said.
They're not coming
I
back.
don't know what came over me, and you kept apologizing. But there are different levels of emotion.
We had many conversations about. It's funny, like you can have these great theoretical conversations before you go to work, and I think they're very important. And then at some point, all of that you hopefully put aside, and then everything is about trusting what happens. And I have to say, in the past, as an actor, you look through things and you go, okay, this scene and this scene, oof. What am I going to do on that day, and how am I going to do that? And a lot of it is imagining, like, how far does a fishing line have to reach to hook in some emotion that you're trying to imagine, or relationship with the experience you sort of can imagine or you've observed in other people, And even though I'm lucky to say, is that real wood, that my kids are beautifully safe, and there was a period of time when I guess I was so scared about them coming into the world, and they were born like really tiny. They were twins, and they're in the hospital for so long, and all the paranoia around being a first-time father. I was certain they weren't going to make it into the world. And I didn't realise until recently, like, how that feeling is never going to go away. Like, it really actually happened to me. And I think it's really interesting to talk about narrative. It's really interesting to think you could show a character being, say, killed on screen, and then the next scene someone runs in and goes, he made it through, he's okay. But you've experienced the death. And I think it's a really great narrative device, for example. But I think that happens to us in life. We think something terrible might happen, and our body, it gets etched into us. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying, as I was approaching this, it was more a question of going, I don't need to cast the fishing line for Clint. I just have to kind of reel things in and just stay true to Robert, because it's not very hard for me to get upset about the idea of loss, It's like it's always there. So it was really a question of going, okay, well, that's me. How does Robert do that? And I love that the script said Robert expresses his feelings, says they're never coming back. And the very next thing he says is, I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. And I think that says all the things about the men that helped me paint Robert in my mind, the ones who would leave the room if they started feeling upset, lest anybody see them, Yeah.
Clint, did you always, when you read the novella, did you think about the timeliness of the subject matter, the fact that in the film we deal with Chinese immigrants, you also deal with, right now we're grappling with AI and technology, and he stares at that chainsaw the way I look at ChatGPT, it's like, it's so timely, this film. We're all grappling with change at such a speed.
Yeah, it did. That was one of the things that attracted me about the book when I read it, and thinking about it as a film and a potential film was just, despite the fact that it's set in this very specific period of time that maybe feels alien to us, was so pressing and prescient, and the things that that he's contending with, all the things that you mentioned, also the environmental ramifications of the fact that we're just pulling and pulling from nature as if it's just a boundless resource, and watching these collapse of ecosystems. It felt almost like by by telling that story with these concerns there, very situated there, that maybe it could get closer to actually get an audience closer to actually like recognizing them in some ways because of the timelessness of them. And I think they are things that we've been contending with for a very, you can read Herodotus, and he talks about how life's moving too fast and the new generation is, kind of taking us somewhere where that feels very foreign. And I think these are all things that we've been dealing with for a very long time and trying to figure out, and unfortunately so, in terms of, the treatment of immigrant populations and things like that. And I don't know, many people have tried to get us out of that loop, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to say anything to get us out of it, unfortunately, but I hope that, like, by enough of us recognizing it, we can maybe get out of that loop.
And I'm being told to wrap up, but I have to ask you about Bryce, your composer, Bryce Dessner. What a terrific score, phenomenal. The way it goes from, kind of operatic composition to, little guitar playing and then this disjointed sounds. Tell us about.
He's a very rare, I think that's exactly right, and that's what excited me. We worked on Jockey together as well, and he's a very rare composer who can write folk music, and then he also writes these very avant-garde compositions, and writes ballets and writes classical compositions. And there was something in the same way that the film has room for all of these different cinematic styles that can come somehow become cohesive around this story of Robert Grenier. It was the same with music, where the music that Bryce wrote really develops over the course of the film and starts, with more like old pianos and acoustic guitars, and then gets very avant-garde at times and keeps developing in even its style. I just find him even in the way that he recorded in a lot of spaces in Portland and Chicago that aren't typically used for film recordings and film soundtrack recordings. He recorded them in old studios that had been there since the time where the story was set, and you can really hear it you can hear the dust in the room of these places, and he's using old ribbon microphones from the time. It's really astounding what he did.
So much I want to ask you guys. But quickly, Clint, you've done 4 movies now, and always there's characters that are damaged in some way or hurt, and seek redemption in their actions. Tell us about that.
I feel like and this is something we connected over as people and storytellers as well, and Greg and I connected, my co-writer Greg Cuidar connected with early on. I could come up here and give you a story about how people hurt each other and people are terrible to each other and all of that, but you can read that in the news every day. You can see that. And I think a lot of times what we're seeking, we all feel damaged and we all feel broken and we all feel a little unworthy of whatever goodness has come to our life. And I think showing how, trying to find some very measured and very realistic representation of some sort of redemption or some sort of transcendence in our daily lives and connection with other people is what I'd like to do.
Yeah. My mind wanders a lot, and when I watch a film, in a good way, I start thinking about ideas and stuff, and I couldn't help watching this film and thinking that it personally becomes like an allegory about artists. And bear with me, I kept thinking about the fact that you as an actor and as a director, you go on these projects and you leave your family behind, and you feel as untethered as Robert does. Is that something that you guys thought about when you were?
Yeah, 100%. I almost felt embarrassed to say that was a connection, only because, the part of me that knows that I have this privileged life where I get to do the thing I love doing and I'm very passionate about, and it's a relatively cerebral, for the most part, life, and I've got pretty rough hands, but it's not from logging. but it's contract work, and it's asking us to go, all right, how long can I be away from my kids? What's the limit, and what's the deficit of all that? So yeah, 100%. It was one of the ways that this is another reason why this really connects with me.
And I think it's one of those things too, 100%. And all of us on the film set, we had moments where we were listening to like him and Bill Macy give their scenes where they're talking about going on to the next job or going home, that you could hear sniffling with the crew. But I think it's something we all feel, and one of the tragedies of modern life. A lot of my friends aren't in the film industry and still experience this, where they're spending an hour in the car each way, every day on the way to work and on the way home, or an hour on the subway, and that's time that they don't have with their families. And then they look up and they're like, oh, I've spent the weekends with my family for the last few years, and now my kids are 5, now my kids are 10, and I think that's something we all experience of going through the day-to-day drudgeries of life at times, and that taking away from the incredible magical moments that we can have with the people that we love.
Speaking of magical moments, seeing your film was a magical moment. And speaking with you guys just now, awesome, magical moment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.